Messenger Bag. Red, white, and blue. We don't use pink. I just recently finished a turtle tote for a customer that was Hello Kitty themed. So, of course, with Hello Kitty, we use pink. So, changing out threads real quick. I realized I hadn't changed them out. So, welcome. We'll get started. Apparently, I had stickers fall. But right now, I'm just loading my machine with my navy thread. At some point today, we will switch to white thread for some top stitching. Now I had to reorganize some because apparently my dog, good afternoon or evening, should I say, Annette? It is 9 o'clock here, so it is evening. I just finished putting my 8-year-old to bed. So, all right. So for those of you who are joining for the first time, what I have been doing is we are working on this bag. It's the Widget Messenger Bag by So Sweetness, and I am making one that is patriotic. Um, but with a little nerdy flair thrown in. So we have our red, white, and blue fabric. Well, I'm over in North Carolina, so definitely on the East Coast, about 2 hours from the Atlantic Ocean. So very much on the East Coast. So actually, next week there will not be a live because I will actually be, next Wednesday is my 20-year wedding anniversary. So I will not be here. So um, I will be celebrating my anniversary with my husband. So, what we've done in the past weeks is we have made our exterior pocket with our R2D2 lining, with our nice variegated zipper tape. We have one of our interior pockets, it again with the R2D2 lining with the Star Wars zipper pull. And this is actually number 3 zipper tape with a custom pull. You can actually find those, sometimes a little harder to find. I only use those when I have something that I have number 3 custom pulls. Otherwise, a lot of times I'll use my number 5 in place of them. We have the interior mesh pocket, which also this is the number 3, and this is a Millennium Falcon pull. But this is our interior mesh pocket, and it is completely contained. So you have it's attached up here, and so you'll be able to see everything. I love these mesh pockets because they're great if you don't mind what's in it being seen. Then we have this is our front pocket. So this will actually be behind our front zipper pocket. And this has a cell phone pocket and pin pockets. And just to show you, we have a pin that fits right down in there. This is what we completed last week. And I'm one of those who actually still carries a checkbook. So this is actually a perfect size. It says cell phone pocket, but I use it for checkbooks. I always have a pen with me. I'm just one of those people. So if you ask me for a pen, I usually have one. And so we have that. And then we made our D-ring connectors, or it calls for D-rings, but I like to that, or it calls for rectangle rings, but I like to where I can remove the strap. So I altered it and we have triangle rings instead. And this is where your swivel clip will hook into. And what's great about this versus a D-ring is that a lot of times D-rings will shift and turn. These will not. They stay in the right direction. And then after I sewed my thing down with a square, it has a single rivet on both sides, which I added after we were done last week. And that helps secure it. And so you can see on the inside what it looks like. And just to show, I did actually go ahead and do my strap because I don't normally sew my straps. I usually use rivets, especially when I'm using seatbelt webbing. Now, if I'm using like cotton webbing that will fray, I will actually use sew 'em instead of using rivets because if you poke a rivet through cotton webbing, it will actually unravel. So that's something, if you're using nylon or seatbelt webbing, you can use rivets. So I have my strap already done. So you see nice, lovely R2D2, depending on how you look, is whether it's like upside down or right side up. So, but we have, usually when I make my straps, I fold over the seatbelt webbing so that the raw edge is contained. As you can see here, I fold it over and then I put rivets. And I have a rivet marking tool. Hold on, I can show you. It's from Emporium Threads. And I have one for both 1 inch webbing and for 1.5 inch webbing. So this is for the 1.5 inch webbing. So you can see, and I use that for placing. This is from Emporium Threads, and she has ones for 1 inch webbing that just have 2 holes that are great too. Thank you, Annette. But we have, that is how, and so it is on the, this is my strap adjuster. And so I have folded there. And then I threaded a swivel hook, fed it back through the strap adjuster, and then we added our other set of rivets. And as you can see, it is folded over. There's the raw edge right there. And I always burn the ends of my seatbelt webbing, especially because otherwise it'll unravel. If you burn the ends, then they're melted and they won't burn, or they won't unravel. Now, for cotton webbing, like I said, I sew them, but I also, what I'll do is I will put like a vinyl or woven um, thing at the end, binding, so that it covers. And I use fray check to death and let it dry, and then I put a like a binding at the end and sew that on, and then sew that down to the other side of the strap. That is another thing you can do if you're using cotton webbing versus seatbelt webbing. So now we're going to get started. So last week we left off with finishing the interior pocket that's in the cell phone pocket and pins. Now what we're going to do is we're going to make our 2 zipper panels, and then we're going to make our front zipper pocket. So that's what my plan is for today. So what we're going to do first, we have what are called the upper panel, both the exterior and the lining. And I have the smaller of the 2 zipper tapes I have left. The other one is for the front zipper pocket. This is the main body of the bag, that main zipper. So what we're going to do, the best way to do this is we are going to sandwich this in between. So what I usually do is I will actually take it, and there'll be about a 1/4 inch overlap here. She has you cut it a little bit bigger, so you'll see that'll be like that. So I've got it on my fabric all the way down, and I will baste it on there with 1/8 of an inch. Then I will add my exterior fabric and sew it at the seam allowance, which in this case is a 1/4 inch. And we will sew that together, and then we will pull it apart and top stitch. And I will do that at the machine right now. So I'm going to move you over here. Okay, so we have our exterior, we have our lining fabric, and we have our zipper tape. So like I said, now you can pin this, you can use double-sided tape. I'll just kind of hold it in place. That's just my own personal preference. There's no right or wrong way to do that. A lot of times when I add the exterior, I will add a pin just to make sure at the beginning and end. If it's a woven fabric, I'll add a pin. I'll do a clip if it's vinyl. Like I said, I'm just basting it. And whenever I base something that is going to be hidden in the seam allowance, I will back stitch, mainly so it doesn't come out on me while I'm doing stuff like this. So we are showing this. Like I said, right now at an eighth of an inch seam allowance just to baste it on. I'll move my zipper pulls back down past it so we're out of the way and it doesn't give that weird lump as you're sewing. Okay. So we have basted, as you can see, to the zipper tape. So I'm going to trim the thread there. And now I am going to place my exterior fabric. And like I said, I will either clip or pin it at the beginning just so I know my and at the end, just so I know things are not stretching or moving and that I know I'm in the right spot. Sometimes, especially if I'm using vinyl, because some vinyls, whether you realize it or not, will stretch. Same with woven fabric. So I will add one right here in the middle. Now, like I said, we're sewing this at a 1/4 inch seam allowance. And I have clipped it at the beginning and at the end, just matching up my two materials, the lining and the exterior. And we're sew that at a 1/4 inch seam allowance. And when we get near our poles, we will move them out of the way so that we, like I said before, some when you're sewing this, if you sew right up close to your zipper pulls, you get kind of a weird hump. So you just want to move them out of your way when you're sewing. And something that is going to be coming up soon. I'm sure most people know that a new game system is out, and I will lift up my presser foot to pull my zipper pulls down out of the way. They don't scoot by as quick when it's a 1/4 inch seam allowance versus an eighth of an inch. So, but since the Switch 2 has come out, I am going to, in the next month or so, going to make a add-on bundle to my Gamers Night Out wallet that will have the measurements and any adjustments for the Gamers Night Out. Okay. So we have sewn that together. So as you can see, they're equal. So I'm gonna trim my thread here. Now we can take it to this over to my iron, and I'm gonna press these down, and then we're gonna top stitch. Okay. Helps if I don't have other things I need to take care of on my ironing board, doesn't it? Been working on a bunch of embroidery orders lately that I wasn't thinking about. So I said, when I do not have woven fabric, if I have for the lining, say I have waterproof canvas, or if I have vinyl as the exterior, I will do what's called finger pressing. Or I have a seam roller that I use that as well sometimes to press open seams. And that is what I will use to keep my seams open. Right now, I'm just pressing down the exterior fabric. Ah, all right. I use this foot pretty much for almost everything. This is called a narrow foot on my machine. It's it's only has an eighth of an inch seam allowance. So it is so if just in comparison, let me see if I find my normal foot right. What actually came as the normal foot. So so just in comparison, here's a Teflon foot. And the Teflon foot is almost twice as wide as my narrow foot. Um, I don't use my normal foot much anymore. Okay, so this one, just to show you, these are the normal and the Teflon foot. They're about the same width, and this is almost a quarter inch. My narrow foot is a eighth of an inch. Now, if I really wanted to get closer, I could use a zipper foot, and I have one in here somewhere. Not exactly sure where at the moment, but see, I have lots of other feet in here. Like I have this is my invisible zipper foot, and I have a piping foot because I make a lot of piping to put on bags, and I do use it for that. And I do use a regular zipper foot sometimes when putting on piping. So it just depends. For the most part, this is the foot I keep on most of the time. So now we are top stitching at an eighth of an inch, and I'm just making sure as I sew it that my lining and my exterior are matching up to each other so that I don't have like weird lumps or anything like that. I could pin these together, but to me, it's more time that it's not needed for myself. But now sometimes I will, like I made a one of my turtle totes, which is a pattern that I wrote, and I actually will pin things in place because I want seams to match up. You're very welcome, Annette. So we are almost all the way down. And you see the zipper pulls at this point are not an issue because they're farther away from the seam allowance. Okay. So we have that nice pretty top stitched zipper panel. Trim our threads, both at the beginning and the end. Now you won't always see me trimming the threads that's on the back of a piece if it's just like the foam or something, but if it's actual lining, I will take the time and do that. So the next piece we need is the our lower panel, exterior lower panel. There's just the one that has our triangle rings, and also our lining lower panel. Okay, so now this is done a little differently than most zipper panels because we do not want to attach the lining and the exterior together. We want them as separate things. So what we're going to do, we are going to flip this here, and since this is woven, I prefer pins when I'm doing woven, and that's just my own personal preference. And we are going to pin it to the zipper tape as well. But yes, and anytime you have a question about what I'm doing, feel free to ask. I have no problems with that. So now what we are going to do, we are going to sew just the zipper tape all the way up to that line where we have the top stitching. And that's only attaching the exterior to the zipper tape, making sure I'm at my quarter-inch seam allowance. Okay. And we're just going to sew right up, basically over the zipper teeth and right up to where it meets that seam. Like I said, anytime you have a question, feel free to ask. So just to show you, that's all we sewed right here. And then what we're going to do is we're going to move our lining out of the way, and we are going to sew the rest of the seam right here underneath that. So I'm actually going to, all right, so we will get it at a 1/4 inch seam allowance yet again. Also, Annette, if there is anything you would like me to concentrate on in future tutorials, feel free to ask. I don't mind if somebody is like, oh, I need help putting a zipper in. That's fine. Like an inlaid zipper or a welt pocket zipper. I can do stuff like that. Okay, so now we have sewn. So what you can see is basically where the seam is all that's left open. Of course, I dropped my lining fabric. But we're going to go ahead and do this on the other side as well with the exterior fabric. So make sure that triangle ring's up out of our way. And I'm going to pin it in place again. Pin that in place right at the zipper tape. So we are going to sew the part that is just our fabrics up to that seam. Making sure we're at our 1/4 inch seam allowance. And also, just for a tidbit for those who are attending the live, I will have a new pattern launching mid-July. Right now, the plan is for July 10th. It is my beach bum pattern. It is a pretty good size tote bag. So just think of everything you might need going to the beach. So like I said, we sewed there right up to that seam yet again. So now we're going to go on the other side, and right below that seam, we are going to sew the rest of the exterior. And I actually like putting my zipper in when I'm going from that direction. So we have trim our threads. And so you see on that side, we have the little space there where our seam is. So now what we're going to do, and as you see, I still use pattern instructions. If it's not a bag I sew about once a week, I do forget. And yeah, I just have to drink my water, else I get dry mouth. Mm. So basically, we're doing the same thing with the lining fabric. We're going to attach it the same way, except we're only sewing the lining fabrics. So I'm going to pin this. Of course, don't stick yourself like I just did. And we're going to pin the zipper. I'm going to go ahead and pin the other side just to make my life easier later. Now, now remember, you're only pinning. So just to show you, the exterior is already sewn. Here's my lining, so it's separate. I'm going to do the same thing on the other side. Now, right where the zipper tape is, you have both sewn together. So, and I will show you once we have that completed. And we are going to clip that in place. All right, so the big thing here is that we are going to sew where the zipper is first. And I'm going to actually use the same stitching and just go over that. Makes my life a little simpler. Okay. And then what I'm going to do, we are doing the exact same thing we did with the exterior. We are folding back our exterior. Apparently there's where my thread I forgot to trim. And we are going to stitch the lining together just like we did the exterior. And only the lining together. Okay. So we can take our pins out. So you can see we have the lining and the exterior sewn separately, and then we have at the zipper tape it's sewn together. Okay, and I'm going to do that on the other side. Yet again, I'm using the stitching I did before. Make sure everything wasn't quite flush with each other. There we go. All right, let's get that pinned and sewn. So I do use pins. You don't see me use them all the time, but so now we're going to sew right up to that seam yet again. We'll just use the same stitching as before. And this is just over the zipper tape that we use the same stitching. I hope you're enjoying your bag making journey. It's a lot of fun for me. All right, so we've sewn that together. And now we are going to sew our lining together yet again with that 1/4 inch seam allowance. Let's move that out of the way. That's better. Only thing with having that triangle ring is a little bigger, so it's trying to be in the way. So what I'm actually going to do is I'm going to clip it. I'm going to start going this way, and I'm actually going to turn it around so I can follow to get closer to that seam. So one way you can do that is to actually flip it around. And since I have my thing, I can stitch along that seam allowance and get closer up to that seam. So you see, we're right up there. Okay. Now, normally, like in a lot of bags, we would top stitch here. But right now, as you see, these are separate, and that's a reason we are not top stitching. So, but just so you see, we have our This is our main zipper panel for the main body of the bag. Mm. We are going to go ahead and mark our centers just a little bit. But we will not need this today, more than likely. We might get there, we might not. So I'm going to set that to the side. So now we're going to do our other one. And I need to make sure to trim this, make sure this is the right trim. Okay. So I have trimmed this to, see, as you cut a larger measurement and then has you trim it to a certain size. I've trimmed this down already. And what we're going to do, we are going to sew our upper and lower part of the front zipper pocket. So just to show you where I'm talking about at this point, I can show you the picture. So now we are working on the zipper right here, this front zipper. And we have our, and as I showed you before, I usually write on what they are so I don't mix up with things. We have our pocket top panel lining and our pocket top panel, which is our exterior. And then we have our lower lining. So we're going to do this exactly like we did the last one, except for one thing. You do not need to keep your lining and exterior separate. So we'll do this one and I'll show you what I'm going to do instead. So just like the last one, we are going to baste this together with our zipper tape. Now this one is exactly the same length as the fabric. So I got to make sure those ends meet. If you want to put like a pin or a clip there to hold it in place, you can. I don't normally, but like I said, that's my personal preference. If I think it's, now some fabrics are more fiddly, so sometimes I do. So now the reason we will not keep this separate is because we are going to work with this as one piece, whereas the other, you kept your lining and exterior separate because we will attach the lining separately from the exteriors, and then we will push the lining into the exterior of the bag, which is why on the interior zipper pocket that we made, we left the bottom of the pocket open. And that's the biggest reason why. You could do it a different way. You could do binding instead if you didn't want to go through all the pockets and everything like that. But sometimes I like that nice clean finish on the inside when you don't use binding. A lot of my bags have binding on the inside, so I have nothing against binding. I do it a lot. But okay, and so now we are going to take our, forgot, let's see, one thing need to look at. Get my picture. Okay, the fabric is up against the thing. That's what I thought. So I want to make sure that as mine's directional. So this is what's going to be out to the outside of the bag. So I want to make sure it's directional. So I want to make sure, because I have directional fabric. So I want it when I have this on the bag to be like that. So I want to make sure to match that up. If you don't have directional fabric, that's not an issue. But like I said, my R2D2 fabric, which was something from Walmart a few years back, and I actually have a Betty Boop one cut out from my teenager, who I think I'm going to surprise with sometime next week. I just have to actually get it sewn. It's all cut out, so not an issue on that regards. And it's a patriotic Betty Boop. So we are sewing this at a 1/4 inch. And I said I based the lining, and you could just do it all in one swoop, not have to do the basting or anything like that. But I like how the basting holds it in place. So that's my biggest thing is I like how the bang holds everything in place and it's less likely to shift with 3 layers when one then two of them are already basted together. So I'm just and all I'm doing is moving the fabric as I go. Like I said, you can flip this all the way, you can pin it all the way. That's not a everybody has their personal preference. I can show you all the fabric in just a minute when we're done for the night. It's an adorable fabric. And I have these heart-shaped patriotic pulls for her bag. So, okay, so we have our pocket panel. So now I am going to take this and top stitch. Now, one difference here is that when I top stitch, after I top stitch, I'm actually going to go all the way down to top stitch, down the side, and back down on the bottom, and then back up. And what that will do is make this as one solid piece, like this. And then I don't have to worry about it coming apart while I'm sewing. I think it will be cute. And I have like red seatbelt webbing to go with it and everything like that. So it should be really cute. Now, I know I didn't take this over to the machine to press it. There's not a lot to press. So I am just kind of finger pressing it as I go along, which sometimes I do. With the other one having foam, this does not have foam on this exterior piece. So it's not as cumbersome, whereas pressing will help kind of manage that. So this one, I'm just trying to make sure my pieces are even with each other. And then I hold it in place and top stitch, and then move down to the next part and hold it down. And I do that all the way down. But we have just a little bit to go. The second part will go a lot faster because the top half is already top stitched. So basically, I'm basting together the bottom half so that it becomes one piece instead of two separate pieces, the lining and exterior. This became, I can treat it as one piece of fabric. And it's a lot easier because at this point, we are going to attach our lower loop for the pocket and we will mark our centers and go ahead and make our pocket. That is my plan for tonight is to get that front zipper pocket done. And then not next week, but in 2 weeks, we will complete this bag. Hours right before July 4th. So perfect timing. I suggest there is a duffel bag. My what to it's by Sincerely Jen, and it is an awesome. And there are three different sizes of the duffel. It's great, and it's not that hard. If you want a more complicated duffel, the Winkender or the Stella bag by Blue Calla is a wonderful bag, but it uses like 4 yards of fabric plus interfacing, and but it has tons and tons of pockets. It's pretty easy to follow, but it would I would say an intermediate pattern. There are lots of really awesome, but as far as the easiest one, I would say the one my brain is not want to think what it's called, but it's from Sincerely Jen, and they have three different sizes of things, duffel bags, and I've made one for myself. I've made one for my daughter. I used one when I went down to Florida a few years back. I would go for the one from Sincerely Jen then. So we are going to put this together, making sure that if you have directional fabric, they're both going the same direction as your upper loop. And then I'm going to take my lining, and now this is where I will sandwich them in between. Like I said, I think it starts with a T, is I think the name, but Sincerely Jen has a very easy, I think it's like 3 pieces, 4 pieces, something like that, plus webbing. It's a pretty simple pattern. I said I've made each size. The large is very large. I will warn you. So um, now I will make a comment, and you will see because I'm going to have to trim some off later. And if I showed you here, not all zipper tapes are the same size. So even if a pattern designer uses a certain size, not all number fives are the same size. And this is a case in point. So, and this could be my cutting error. So my exterior fabric was fine, but my interior fabric was a little bit wider, and that's going to be the case here. And just trim off the extra so it's even with your zipper tape or your other piece, and it won't be an issue. Um, it's not going to mess with the integrity of the bag or anything like that. So don't let that bother you. So right now I am sewing the first side on. But yeah, if you're ever looking for a certain type of pattern, hi Nicole. But yeah, if y'all are ever looking for recommendations for a certain type of pattern, I've made a lot of different designers' patterns. I have some of my own. Like I said, y'all are the first to hear. And now this one, we are going to fold it down and top stitch across there. I said, I don't mind supporting, I support lots of other pattern designers if we go by my pattern collection. But I don't mind recommending what I think is the easiest or the best. I will tell you my favorite designers are probably Aura Rosa patterns and Speed. I also like So Sweetness, Blue Calla. Um, and there's some others like Swoon and of course my own patterns. But so we have the first side. So if you see, there's a little overlap here. There's either the same exact width here, so that I did not cut them wrong, but not all zipper tape. And if you notice, it's only about an eighth of an inch difference. So in a minute, I will actually trim that down after I get this sewn and I have basted it together so that it'll stay together while I'm trimming it. And I will actually take it over to my cutting table so I can use a rotary cutter and a ruler so it's nice and straight. Okay, so now if you see when we are sewing this together, so the first side goes on real easy. Then we have to kind of fold this up. Now this is a little skinny loop and it is long, so you see it kind of folds over. If I've sewn the Cassiopeia, I've sewn lots and lots of Catalinas. We won't talk about how many Magdalena. The Magdalena is probably my favorite because it's the most customizable. I make a lot of shaped or themed uh, or rest patterns. I've made a Togepi for my sister-in-law. I made a Jigglypuff for my daughter for her Christmas a couple years ago, where I actually did hand cut applique and everything. I've also done custom anime bags. So I do a lot of those kind of things. I love to customize. Ora Rosa patterns are some of the best written patterns that I've ever come across. in my opinion. So we have sewn that together yet again, and we are going to top stitch again. And as you see, my fabrics are directional and they are both going the same direction. So I have sewn a lot of I like the Netty wallet from or my favorite wallet pattern would have to be the Maryland from Lynn's Handmade. Like I said, I've made lots of different things. I don't mind sharing my favorites of different things. Okay, so now that I've finished this top stitch, I'm going to back stitch, but what I'm going to do is just pivot my needle after I'm done back stitching, and I'm going to baste all this together all the way around. I think when I started writing my own patterns, I went with how descriptive a lot of her patterns were so that everybody knows exactly how I'm putting something together. And so, like I said, my next pattern will come out next month. The plan right now is for July 10th, and it is my beach bum bag. And the week after the release of the pattern, I will do a tutorial, start a tutorial on my YouTube for how to put it together. I'm actually going to be putting one together tomorrow to finish up my last minute writing of my instructions. Make sure I've got everything right so I can send it out to testers. So, like I said, we are basting this together so it acts like one piece of material. And this is important when we're putting together that pocket. Okay, so I've got the bottom base or one side basted. So now I'm going to baste this together with the lining at the top part. And now, because there is no fabric in the upper loop here, this is just the lower loop. And I'm doing it 1/8 of an inch from the top of that zipper tape. And then I'm going to, that extra fabric that, like I said, not all zipper tape is created equally, even though they say, oh, it's number 5. All number 5 should be the same. They should be. That's the prerogative, but that doesn't mean they are. And it's a good thing for people who are relatively new and they go, well, when I made this pattern the first time, everything matched up perfectly. And I cut everything else out the same way the second time, but they didn't match. And that the reason being is because if you're using a different zipper tape or something like that, they may not. And that's just not something a lot of people think about. So we are going to trim this away. We're going to trim our threads. I'm going to go trim my excess away right here. I'll be right back. Taking it over to my cutting table. Sorry, I can't take y'all with me. That would require a lot of effort on my part of moving y'all. But I will show you once I'm done. So I'm sticking it in here, lining up the top of my zipper tape, and I will trim this. And if you have done my cube pattern, this is actually something I come across, and I'm like, when you attach the back of the cube, I say you may have to trim, depending on your anywhere between 1/8 and 1/4 inch of fabric to make it where it is flush with your zipper tape. And that is just because not all zippers are the same width, even if they say they are. So now, if you look, everything is perfectly equal with each other. Everything's pasted together. So now at this point, what we're going to do is we are going to mark our centers. So we are going to match up our seams, and then I'm going to mark my centers in front and back. And And if anybody who's not seen me do this before, you're going, "Oh my gosh, she's using a Sharpie." Yeah, I'm using a Sharpie. It's inside my seam allowance, and I'm not going to rub it off. So I've done my bottom seam. Now we're marking all our centers. So we have our top seam, and then we're going to have our quarter seams, which are basically the halfway point of your sides. So I'm marking it on my zipper tape as well as my fabric here. So basically both sides. And now what we do is we will match up our center marks from top and bottom, and we will mark our quarter seams. Now, sometimes with certain designers, Lynn's Handmade is one of them, they will have gusset markings instead of quarter markings, and that is where the seam of the gusset should match up. And you need to make sure to read your pattern to make sure, what am I supposed to have here? Am I supposed to have quarter markings? Am I supposed to have gusset markings? Um, Sarah from So Sweetness, she actually says to take your paper pattern and take it over there to mark it. I just usually fold it in half to find my quarter markings on my main panel pieces. So it's teaches on. But I've made a good number. I've made tons of the part sling. So got to mark the other side. So I got to make sure that's matched up. Matched up. Where is it? So we have. I just forgot to mark the zipper tape on the side. I did mark the fabric. So I should have 3 marks on the zipper tape, and there we go. All my things are marked. Okay, so now we have our exterior pocket sides. So we have our exterior pocket. Now, everything else that I've done has had this as the exterior. However, I did a fussy cut. This is going to be my exterior front, which is why it has the foam. And this is going to be my lining of my front pocket. So I kind of flip flopped it. So what you need now is you're going to take the center pocket here, and we're going to lay, and as you can see, I've got my center markings on the main fabric as well. So I'm going to line up my center markings of my zipper. A lot of people will use clips instead. And I will say, having this unzipped will make it easier. We are going to match up our quarter markings. And then we're going to mark up our center marking on the back. And then we will clip all the way around. You just clip all your centers first. And I say that because you want them to be where they're supposed to be. Now I'm going to take it just a little by little and pin it in place. And one thing that the designer from So Sweetness, Sarah Lawson, says, in your corners, clip about an eighth of an inch into your seam allowance. Remember, your seam allowance is a quarter of an inch, and we're just clipping at the curves. And you do this on the zipper tape as well. No more than an eighth of an inch so that it will be within your seam. But if you can see, just to show you, one corner, it just does not lay flat. Whereas if I do this with those little clips, it kind of settles in there pretty well. So I'm going to pin those now that I've got those clipped, and I will do that as I get to each corner. Now, this is not something she says to do. She says you pin this, and then let's see. Okay, she has you sew this at a quarter-inch seam allowance, and then you will add your lining. And what you can do is actually flip it over from this and use that seam allowance and follow along and sew the lining on top of it. So we're going to clip in our corners, like I said, about an eighth of an inch. Just clipping around the corners. I just find it's easier as I get to them versus doing it ahead of time, just so I know I've done it. Are there any questions so far? Any questions that need to be asked? And I'll apologize for the connectivity issues last week. Uh, Something was going on with our internet, and I apologize for that. Happens sometimes. It was better the next day, and it's been better since, but you never know. Okay. So we are going to pin now. So we have all the fabric pinned. So now I'm going to pin up the zipper tape. I said I am not the fastest at pinning. That's just because that's me. Like I said, I don't always clip um, zipper tape. I will do a few little clips, but I don't do near as many because if you clip too deep into your zipper tape, it will unravel. So I will just do the bare minimum to get it to lay flat versus I will put a lot more on fabric because it won't fray and come apart like zipper tape will. So just to show you, so you see there's a little bit that I want to lay down right here. So I'm only going to do it for about a half an inch worth of little clips, and I'm just doing about an eighth of an inch, maybe not even that, clipping to go around that curve. It does not hurt your sewing, and you're going to have it sewn down. So just enough here to keep it where it's going to lay flat as you sew it. No, my daughter's all excited for the Dragons movie coming out because she is going to be using the dragon pin bag I made her last year. She's been saving it for when the Dragons movie came out and when we go to Epic Universe. I actually made if you don't know what a pin bag, it's where you have a clear vinyl window, so you can showcase like pins and other things like that. And I made one in the shape of the window in the shape of a dragon wing, and I used reptilian scaled clear vinyl, so it looks like a dragon wing. And I have How to Train Your Dragon fabric from Also Pretty Custom 6. Okay, so now we're to the point where I need to clip this again. So just about an inch worth of clips. So not near as many as when I had on the bottom when it's fabric. See? So we are going to pin that in place. Okay. And I will show you what everything looks like pinned together. So we have everything pinned. And what I'm going to do is we are going to, I usually start at the bottom. I'm going to start at the bottom. That's usually where I start and stop. And we're going to sew this at a 1/4 inch seam allowance. Now the pattern only calls for 1 pull. I'm using 2 pulls just because I like that ability to open it with 2 pulls and I like being able to showcase more pulls, but it's not required to have 2 pulls. A lot of times I will sub in 2 pulls instead of 1, even if the pattern just calls for 1, just because I like the look of 2 pulls and I like being able to fully open the bag or open it like halfway and it didn't have to be all the way unzipped. So like I said, I'm just going around attaching this at a 1/4 inch seam allowance. And you can do this part with the zipper tape zipped. I just found it's a little easier with it unzipped. And so, as you see, I'm not the fastest to sew, but you don't have to be. It's how you're comfortable, how you feel about, did I get this accomplished thereabouts, or am I happy with the result? It doesn't have to be a speed race. If it's something I've done lots and lots of times, I'm a little faster. I can about sew a Maryland wallet in my sleep because I've made so many. Let's just say I probably made me myself and not orders probably about 8. So as like I said, that's my favorite wallet pattern for my personal use. Not necessarily my favorite to sew, but it's my favorite to use. So that's why I make a bunch of them. I seem to make one for to match every bag. So I may have to make me an R2 themed wallet to go with this. And whether I do it all 4th of July or not, time will tell. So we are just moving our way around, taking our time. And we are almost all the way around. Like I said, most of the time it's actually taking pinning this darn thing. So gotta love that. But it helps if you pin it well enough, then things don't move, or clip it well enough, things don't move while you're sewing. Apologize for my elbow in the picture, trying to get around that corner, that last corner. And there's our last pin coming out, and we'll mate up with our seam over here. Okay. I will trim that thread. So now we are going to take our lining piece right here, and we are going to clip it with all our centers again, and then we will pin all the way around. And now this is where you will actually need your zipper tape unzipped so that it's out of the way and there's less likely you're going to catch something. As is something she even says in her pattern is that you need to make sure this is unzipped. Now the next step after we get this done is that we will turn it right side out. And then we will top stitch it. And at that point, I'm actually going to switch thread, or at least the top thread, so that when I top stitch on my R2D2, it will be white and not show up as much, so I can showcase the fabric more than I can the top stitching. There are times that I will actually use a contrasting top stitch. Now, I will say when you use a contrasting top stitch, you do want to make sure that you feel very confident because it's going to show every flaw in your top stitching. So we are clipping this all the way around again. You don't have to use quite as many pins because that zipper is already in place. It has already been had the curves trimmed. And now we are just putting the lining on top. And there are two ways to do this. You can sew it from the top of the lining, or you can turn it over and sew it from the exterior side and use the seam that you did earlier to stitch right on top of that so you know you're stitching right in the right place. Now, the thing is with this one is that we are going to leave about a 5-inch hole at the top for turning because this is going to become one piece. As you said, this the front part of the pocket. We will attach the pocket to the bag. Whoop, about to lose. Okay, just lost a pin down to the floor. Pick it up later. So we're making sure to pin everything in place. Make sure I go through the bottom. So sometime on the YouTube channel, I will show how I do applique or reverse applique. Now I will use a few more pins up here because I want to make sure that my zipper tape lays flat and doesn't get caught up in the seam, because if it gets caught up, then I have to go take stuff out, and I don't really want to take stuff out. And that seam ripper have not had to see each other today. I'd like to keep it that way. So when I'm sewing this, I will be making sure and feeling, okay, is my zipper tape laying flat? Am I getting wrinkles or anything like that? There's something you need to double check as you're sewing it, because otherwise you're going to have to flip it right back wrong side out and take out some stitches, which is never fun. But just in case you're curious, it's always close at hand. I always have my seam ripper close at hand. Because even though I'm an experienced bag maker, doesn't mean that things go the way I want to. Or just don't pay attention and I miss something. So don't be afraid of making mistakes. That's my biggest thing to tell people. Don't be afraid of making mistakes. You can always take it out. And if you can't, you can always redo it. I have done that many times, especially when I was learning to sew. I learned to sew when my eldest, who is now 17, when she was about a year and a half old, I decided I was going to learn how to sew to make her little dresses. We won't talk about how many times my seam ripper came into play there. And then I started this bag making journey about 6 or 7 years ago. But I make about anything. I haven't found many things I can't sew. So always like to challenge myself, which is why a lot of times I actually do historical doll clothing because that usually teaches me things I have not learned before, and I go for the more advanced patterns. I know that sounds odd, but those are kind of like a palate cleanser. And there goes another pin. I'll just take my magnet later and find all the missing pins. Usually end up finding about 10 of them. So we have it pinned in place. So you can actually just go and sew a 1/4 inch here, or a lot of times I will go and sew following the seam and I know I'm in the right spot. So I'm going to sew from the wrong side of my exterior just so that I know my seam is in the same spot that I started with. And I will make sure to follow my seam as closely as I can, and I will make sure things lay flat. So I will stick my fingers in here from time to time to make sure things are not laying in that seam line. And also, this is one reason I've never made this bag using vinyl, mainly because I can't imagine having to do this with vinyl. And now, this one I should have started up at the top because we need to leave a hole up here for tining. So I'm actually going to stop when I get up here and then I'll start back and go back to the bottom. No, that's my own fault. I should have done that. My brain wasn't thinking. Like I said, feel free to own up to any mistakes that you make. No, what would have been really bad if I hadn't realized just now, then I would have had to pull that out and then redo it. That would have been fun. Basically, my zipper tape out of the way. I'm reaching my finger in and pushing it down so it's nice and flat as I go around the curve. And I will actually make sure to go over the curve while I'm doing this so that when I'm closing it up after I turn it, I'm not having to come across with the curve. So I want to get to a flat portion. So about right there. Okay, and then I'm going to pick up over here, right around the spot for a flat portion. Make sure to push that zipper tape down flat. So we can take those top 2 pins out because that's my opening to turn it. Like I said, I'm sticking my finger in there to make sure that zipper tape lays nice and flat around that corner. There's nothing wrong with that. Just basically saying behave. And that's the biggest thing when you're sewing around a corner with zipper tape is making sure that it lays flat. So we're around that last curve there for the zipper tape, and then we're going to go down here to the bottom where we started, making sure all my zipper tape's laying flat, that my pulls are out of the way. I have had my pull get in the way before and then broke a needle doing it. Those are always fun. Okay, we're going around our last curve, just making sure everything's laying flat. And we are almost done attaching this. Okay, so now we are going to pull this out wrong side out. We are going to push everything through. So I actually find when you turn this, it's actually better to start with the bottom corner than the top, because then you can push it up. That's just my personal experience. This is also why I would not do vinyl for this bag in particular, because small pocket. So now that it's turned right side out, I'm going to take my little handy dandy pointer sticky and push all my corners out. Make sure everything looks good for that seam. Make sure I don't have any weird lumps, that my zipper tape wasn't caught. Okay. Okay, the bottom is all good. So we pull that all the way through. Okay. Now your front is sewn down because we sewed that down at a 1/4 inch seam allowance. What is not sewn down is your lining. So at this point, we are going to fold our 1/4 inch seam allowance here. And we are going to pin it in place, closing it up. And I'm just making sure. And what I do is I feel and make sure my thing is even with my front, the seam. And we pin that in place. I'm gonna put a couple more pins here just to hold it a little better. Like I said, I don't want it to shift, and the best way to make sure something doesn't shift, lots of pins. So I'll just put a couple more pins. If even though it's not a large hole, it's more of a you ain't gonna move on my watch type of pinning. It's the best way I can put it. Okay, so if you see from here to here, it is not attached back here. So now what we're going to do is we are going to top stitch all the way around. Well, not all the way around. We're just top stitching from the zipper portion. We are not top stitching the bottom. We are not top stitching down here. We are only going up here. So that's why right now I want the white thread here. So right now I'm just going to change out my top thread, not my bobbin. I'll leave the bobbin as blue. We'll set it to the side because we're going to go back to the blue in just a minute. We're going to put white thread on for top stitching. Excuse me. I know we're running a little longer today, but I wanted to finish this part right here tonight for you. Okay. So we've threaded our machine, and then we're going to start right here at the beginning of zipper tape, and we are going to top stitch. Now, I did not take this over to my machine, but I've gotten everything and I'm making sure to pull the material away from the zipper as I top stitch this, just so that I make sure that it is not in the way. Like I said, I want this to be kind of inconspicuous stitching so that it won't take away from the R2D2 front of the bag. So that's why I switched thread here. So we have now closed, now that we've gone over all our pins, that hole is now closed. And then we are getting all the way around. And we will stop down when we get to the gusset of our panel. Okay. And we have trim our thread away on both front and back. And just so you can see, the back side is completely top stitched. And because I left the navy blue thread in there, you can't see it. And the other than the fact that you can see the indentation, the white thread is less obvious than if I'd left the navy thread in. Now, so we're going to zip this closed. Now that the zipper's done, so we can actually zip this closed. Tell me that doesn't look cool having R2D2 with R2D2 pulls right there. So now what we're going to do is, so one of the things, one of the options, just to show you, is to put a grommet. And that's for like headphones, charge packs, or anything like that right here. And I'm actually going to do that. So I actually am going to do that. Now, the way they say to do it is that you mark, it says 1.5 inch in from the left side and 1.5 down from the top edge. So I have one of my little handy dandy rulers. I have a baby ruler over here. Gotta love the baby quilting rulers. So I am going to do 1.5 over. This is what I want. 1.5 over and 1.5 down. And so I will just make a mark right here. Doesn't work matter that I'm using a Sharpie because this will be a hole. So what we will do is we will cut our grommet all the way through. Thank you, Annette. We will cut our grommet all the way through. And what's kind of cool, I actually found some grommets that are white. And I have my press set up. I just need to change to the grommet cutter. But just to show you, once I find where my bag went, in just a second. Oh, well, I have more of them, so I will just pull out another one. And I need the bottom and the rubber ring. All right, so I have grommets and I actually have white ones so that they will not be seen. So I'm going to take this over here. And what we're going to do is there are several ways of doing this. You can cut it open. I actually have a die for my uh, press that I will cut it for me. Just got to pull it out. Right now, I still had the die for the um, rivets that I use. Haven't used I think that's the one I need. That is for that size grommets. That's to set it. Where is my cutter? Gotta love when you are looking at all your dies and they elude you, right? There we go. I believe that's the right size. And so, just to show you, I do have dies that I use with I have a rivet press, and this is a cutting tool. So, if you can see, it will make the hole. You screw that into the top, and this presses down and makes the hole. It makes life a little simpler when you're cutting. And that is my one for grommets. So I will center that mark where that little spring is. So it will cut it for me and it'll cut it exact. And I don't have to do the work of cutting it where it should be, sort of. Okay. So we're going to trim. It is being a little difficult. I'm going to trim out the first layer, probably because I'm going through foam, not like through vinyl or the like. So that's the good thing about these. You can always trim it off. I apologize. This is not on camera. Like I said, to move you, it's a little more difficult. So we are going to get this grommet in real quick. And then we will finish attaching you to the front of the bag. And then next week we should, or not next week, in 2 weeks, we should be able to finish. And if you just heard somebody yelling Casper, that was my teenager taking the dog out. So I have cut the hole for this grommet just to show you. Nice big hole. So let's hope I haven't messed it up. But I have done this before. So you see it goes all the way through on the back side too. So now we're going to put our grommet in. And I will actually get my grommet press in. That's it. I actually have dies that will set my grommets as well. Hopefully taking out user error. The other way is to take a rubber mallet and hammer it with the die that comes with it. Uh, Let's see. Got to set this. And that worked. So just so you can see, it has now been put in. And so we have our grommet. So as you can see, it looks really good. It blends in. Kind of looks like it's meant to be there. Do one more press real quick to get it good and flush. Okay. So the last part of this is that we are going to take our piece that looks like this. This is a cutout. And we have marked our centers, top and bottom. We need to make sure we have our top and bottom equaling each other. So I make sure my centers match, and I will clip around the centers, and then I will clip all the way around. And I will switch back to my navy thread in just a minute. But we are going to clip all our seams together, or our curves and everything here. Going all the way around. And then our last step for today will be to attach it to where we have cell phone pocket, which is our other exterior. And that will cover up the cell phone pocket under that. And then what is left of the bag is actually finishing attaching the zipper to the main body for both the lining and the exterior. And that is all that will be left after this week. So we are just going to pin all the way around, making sure to get around those curves. Now we're not clipping curves here because we want them to fit those curves. And I'm just pinning around. After I pinned the four centers, the two side centers and the top center. Now, when you mark this cutout piece, you actually will mark on both sides so that when we are ready, we can match it to our other exterior piece, and they will be perfectly matched up with centers, and we will baste it together or stitch it together. Since it will be in the seam allowance, I usually don't take out basting, so I just call it stitching usually. Like I said, I know this is a longer one than I normally do, but I wanted to get to a certain point with y'all today. And then all we will have are the 5 pieces left, our main zipper panel, and the front and back of both the main and lining pieces. And then was just putting them all together and then adding our strap. But after this part, it makes you feel accomplished because you're like, "Oh my gosh, I put all that pocket together and everything." So, we're just going all the way around. We're almost done pinning. And we're going to sew this at a 1/4 inch seam allowance. And like I said, I need to switch back to my navy thread because everything else here is going to be sewn with the navy thread so that it kind of blends in. Mm. Okay, so we're going to switch our white thread out for some back for the navy blue. I said sometimes it's worth being fussy about the top stitching colors when you want a certain look on a bag. So we trim off the excess right there. Whenever I end up changing out threads, I trim off the corner because a lot of times it gets frayed and I have more trouble getting it through the hole. So I just do it to kind of eliminate that issue. Okay, so what we're going to do, we're going to sew this at a 1/4 inch seam allowance. This is not near as hard as when we were sewing the zipper because there are no, other than moving it around that curve, you don't have anything that's laying funny or anything. So basically, you're just following a line here. It just happens to curve. So you just move it as you go. What's also great you can use is since we basted the fabric together on this zipper panel, you can also use that as a guide because that's 1/8 of an inch and we're sewing at a 1/4 of an inch. So you just are sewing 1/8 of an inch from that seam or basting that you did. That's another way to look at it if you want. So it's just the way it should, making sure our zipper pulls stay out of the seam. Like I said, ask me how I know. I've run over more than one zipper pull in my time. Just something decides, oh, I need to be under the needle right now, whether it wants to, where it needs to be or not. So I'm curious if anybody else is planning on going to see the new Dragons movie this weekend. My household, especially myself, are huge Dragons fans. I love Toothless ever since it came out in 2010, so 15 years ago. But we are almost done for tonight. Almost done attaching all of that. And we are all the way around. Trim your threads. Okay. I'm gonna trim some of these raw pieces of fraying fabric off. All right, so now you're like, I have raw edges. Well, what's gonna happen is that, and I've got a little lump right here. I gotta fix that. See, this is why you double check everything. So I'm gonna take out a couple stitches over here. It's like, oops, that happens. Not a biggie. That's just about 5 or 6 stitches. But I'd rather not have a weird lump in my bag. So we are going to sew this, making sure that lays flat. Instead of a lump this time. And I will check all 4 corners, but that one needed to be fixed. Not something most people would have noticed, but I will. But I just double check all my corners, make sure everything laid flat. Otherwise, but everything's good other than that. So what we will do, we are going to, you can take it to your iron and press this out, and you want to press the seam towards this cutout piece, for the main reason being that I've got some threads or fraying pieces of fabric that went through. Gotta love when that happens. So I just trim away the excess. But you're gonna do that. So when we top stitch this down to hold the pocket in place, that your raw edge is encased and you won't see it. So you don't have to worry about those raw edges being there. But what we're gonna do now, we are going to take a piece that has the self going to match our centers again. We do a lot of matching centers at this point. But we are going to put this all the way around at our centers. And then before we are not going to base the outer edges first. You can, but I usually do the other first. We are going to top stitch around to encase that pocket and make that seam lay flat. So I'm going to pin all the way around just to make sure everything is even with that other piece. Now I am going to actually baste it, the exterior part first, only because that will hold it in place better. And we are kind of stretching this fabric a little bit to make it so having that basted before we do our top stitching will make your life a little easier. And it's going to have to be basted anyways. So And almost done pinning all the way around, or about halfway done pinning all the way around. And if you saw the wrinkles in my front pocket, they'll be taken care of after, because they got all wrinkledy with the turning through the pocket, but it's going to look really cool having that R2D2 front. Almost done pinning. This seems to take the most amount of time. I'm about to lose my scissors down the table. I love when your fabric drags your accoutrements down to the floor. Now, this grommet that is in that front pocket, that is completely optional. I just like it because, like, if I have to charge my phone or something, I can have a charge pack in that front pocket, or I can have. I don't really have corded headphones anymore, but if I have a charge pack, I can put it in there and I have to hold on to it, and it can be plugged into my phone, and it doesn't have to be in my pocket. So that's one thing I do like. One more pin, and we're good to go. So just to show, there it is all pinned together. We're going to baste it together around the outside using an eighth of an inch seam allowance. This is basically to hold everything in place like it should be. Basically making this one single piece of fabric. Pull out our pins as we go around. Now I will actually unzip the pocket to help me with the next part. But the reason I based on the, she doesn't say to do this first, but I find it's better because your fabric's less likely to move if it's stitched down than if it's just pinned down or clipped down. So this is why I do this first before I do the top stitching of the pocket. And that's pretty much the only reason why. Okay, we have almost all the way around now. Basting it on there. Just so it does not move. And this will be the front of our bag. So after this, we will have a completed interior, front pockets, and we will have our completed exteriors with pockets. And we will have our completed zipper panel, or main body zipper panel completed. And I think my bobbin just ran out right there. Of course, right there. Sorry for that. We have to run me a bobbin real quick. Apparently, I thought I had another navy bobbin. I do not. So we're going to run a bobbin real quick. Apologize for that. Gotta love bobbins run out at the most inopportune times, which actually makes me glad it happened here at the very bottom versus doing the top stitching where we're holding everything in place. So there's worse places it can run out. And at least I noticed it before I stitched half of the way around and had to repin everything. So running that bobbin real quick. Gotta love a really quick bobbin wind. Usually try to have extra bobbins, but apparently I thought I did, but I didn't. Lots of other colors that are not blue. And let's thread our needle back. There we go. So at least there was only about an inch left to go. I don't even need that pin. I basically had all the pins out before I needed to stitch. Okay. So now what we're going to do is we are going to actually, and this is where I actually open the zipper to help me do this, to help push my raw edge in towards the what will be hidden. You're very welcome, Annette. And we're going to make sure that the raw edge is encased in between here that we will not see. It is not going to be in our pocket. So I'm going to top stitch 1/8 of an inch from that seam. And we just go slow to make sure. And like I said, this is where having that pocket open and the other side already secured will help you. So I'm just going around slowly, making sure that seam is encased as I'm doing the top stitching. And I will show you what it looks like when we get done, how there are no raw edges on the inside. So I'm just making sure that ends up there. You can press it there. I find it still likes to travel even if you press. So if I'm doing it like this way with the pocket open, I don't always press it, especially if I've already done the basting on the outside. But like I said, it makes it lay flat because it has nothing to pull from. Okay, so we've almost finished this front pocket. This is our last bit to finish the front pocket, and then we will stop here for night, and I will show you all the pieces we have done as of right now. Apparently I didn't unzip both sides. Okay. So this is not a hard pattern, and if you purchase it from So Sweetness, she has how-to videos you can purchase as well. You can purchase just the pattern. You can purchase the pattern and videos. I don't think I have the video of this pattern, but I have made this bag several times. I think this is like the fourth or fifth time I've made this bag. So, and I've made a lot of her other bags, so that makes a difference too. I've made probably her most made bag out of her patterns is the Park Sling, which is great for going to like Disney and stuff like that. It holds a lot of stuff, has lots of pockets. One little curve does not want to lay flat. That's when it likes to be a pain in the rear. Mm, okay. But yeah, I hope that duffel bag pattern goes well for you, Unit. Like I said, it's one that's a pretty simple follow. Minimal pieces. All right, our front pocket is done. So we are going to turn this back. So we're done for tonight. Here is our completed front pocket, stitched and everything. So just to show you what it looks like zipped up, this is our front pocket. Like I said, I kind of like how it looks with the very distinct R2D2 on the front. And then the rest of the bag is this, the red, white bloop. So we have that. And when we unzip it, well, we have our we have our pin pocket. This is our, if you want like my ring, you could use, instead of a D ring, you could use a 1/2 inch swivel clip and clip your keys in. But I have a carabiner on my keys, so I can clip it right through there. Then you have the cell phone pocket. For me, I'll use it for checkbooks and pin pockets. And just so you can see, if I turn it like this, my raw edges are completely encased. You can't see the raw edges. So now we're down to 5 pattern pieces. Well, not pattern pieces, but 5 pieces. We have our front of the bag. We have our back of the bag. We have our interior mesh pocket, our interior zipper pocket, and then we have our zipper panel. Now, one thing I will say before I continue with this is that I do put cork tags on my bags. In this case, I have little blue ones that I'm going to stick on the back right here, just above my pocket. And that's where I'm going to put it. I'm going to have it centered right there, just below my pocket, so that it is not in the way of my pocket or the seam. And then we're good. So next week, in 2 weeks, because next week I will be out celebrating my anniversary with my husband. In 2 weeks, we will finish up the bag and we'll be done the week before July 4th. So we will see what it looks like at then. And thank you both, Nicole and Annette, for telling me how it looks. Thank you so much. And I look forward to seeing y'all next week or in 2 weeks. I keep saying next week, but I'll see y'all in 2 weeks. Bye.